Hi everyone. For our final module, we are going to be talking about the different ideas around reflection and supporting struggling writers. So the big thing with reflection, there's not going to be a lot of new stuff necessarily, but you are going to be tasked with figuring out, what works best for you in terms of facilitating student reflection. Um, I asked this question in the forum this week, but I also asked the question just to think about it in terms of setting yourself up for this discussion and this work. What strategies do you currently use to facilitate student reflection on writing? There's a lot of different things that I've done in the past, and some worked really well, and others did not work so well. And so I'm always constantly thinking of how I might improve that reflection process so it is meaningful for the student and so they feel like they can get something out of it. Big thing that for the student reflection in this work and in this course, I really thought we could just draw back on a lot of the previous tools that we shared here. So here are some ideas that you could possibly do for student reflection. Now I know all this is contingent upon grade level, the type of student, what works best for them or not, access to technology, that all matters. I mean, in terms of what you can use. Maybe paper and pencil really is the best method at this point for you. However, having the options with the tools and maybe using this as a reflection piece, doing this every once in a while if you only have access to a lab or, a cart of devices, it's a good way for students to reflect in a different capacity. So you could do screencasts, you could do an audio recording, a podcast of sorts, you could blog about it, you could use Seesaw, a relatively new tool, digital portfolio. I think that works really well for the younger students, especially with the iPad app that Seesaw has. You could use Google Templates. You could create your own for the reflection process. Google Forms, that's one that I've used a lot, and that's the one that I would continue to use because Google Forms is so easy to create and share with others as far as getting their feedback or their reflection. If your students are more visual students, maybe they could use Google Drawing as a way to draw what they reflected on. The big three images that came to mind when they thought about their writing experience. I don't know, maybe that's a little more abstract, but it might be a decent idea to consider. Or maybe they could use Google Docs. Go back to Google Docs and have them create a reflection on their own document and add reflection comment bubbles to their own writing via the commenting tool. Commenting on the work that they've done, reflecting on, at this point I thought this point I learned this, at this point I really struggled with this, here's why. And, just do a weekly reflection, especially if they're doing like a final project paper or something like that. It takes several weeks. Maybe they can do weekly reflection on their work and they could be in the comment bubbles. And that'd be a good way to see their thoughts as they're reflecting on their work. But the possibilities are endless, so what else could you do? I'll leave it at that, because I think, you have a lot of tools at your disposal. Now, how are you going to facilitate the reflection? This one is a little more detailed as far as supporting struggling writers. There are an immense amount of tools out there. I might be just scratching the surface here. Some of these might be reviewed to you, but hopefully you'll find something that you can use. So again, asking the question, how do you currently support struggling writers? It might be conferences that you do, one-to-one conferences or small group conferences. It might be using a very specific rubric and say these are the must-haves that you have in your paper before you can even go on to the publishable state. Or perhaps you have a very good peer or parent relative feedback system that students go through and they get support through that. Maybe you have a writing center. I doubt that many of you have that, but it seems more college based. But nonetheless, having access to really proficient writers and using them to help those that struggle, I think is another great way to support those students, if that's feasible. Big thing though that I think of when I think of struggling writers, and especially when we're using technology, is sometimes just technical. So when you think about the technical changes that you can do, I'm thinking of something like tab resize. So like on a Chromebook, students are trying to squeeze two tabs next to each other. So they're doing their research on one side and then they're writing on the other side. Tab resize does a really nice job of organizing this work. So you can do your work side by side, top and bottom. And it's a simple Chrome app. Comes from the Chrome Web Store. You can go to it right here. And just for demonstration purposes real quick, I can take a tab resize and I can resize the tab like that. Side by side, it organizes it for me. It's really helpful. That might be the technical thing that students really struggle. I can't, I hate going back and forth between web pages. This is going to help me. Another thing that you could access, and some of you may have heard of this, Read and Write for Google. A lot of accessibility pieces. This is great for the ESL, ELL struggling learners, those students that struggle as they write and translating ideas in another language. Struggling readers and writers can use the Google Docs toolbar to read aloud and highlight text. When this first came out, my students did use it. I didn't have much say, in terms of they just got their devices, they were figuring out things to use. I think that the service has improved immensely. If you want to learn more, you can go to their website and you can see what's new. You can see that as a teacher, you get a free premium teacher subscription. I don't know how long that's going to last, so maybe you want to get in on that as soon as possible. Otherwise, you can see the freemium service. There are free version versus premium version. You can check out their matrix, though, as far as what's free and what's not. I think this works really well for those that are in support roles for students. I've seen a lot of traction in those type of courses. What's really nice now, you can use it in iPads or Android tablets as well. And, as far as getting into it and using it, if this is something, just on this base brief description, I definitely would suggest getting into it. It's in the Chrome Web Store. Again, you just add it, and you'll see it up here. And a toolbar will come up, and then you can, as far as allowing permissions, the toolbar will show up, and then you can do certain things with the Read and Write toolbar. You have 30 days to work with this, as you can see here. But, if you identify yourself as a teacher account, then you could have the service beyond that. Just revisiting a tool, those struggling writers, the research tool might be their best friend. They struggle with finding quality information. They struggle with finding, something. They need to know what a word means, or they need to get out a thesaurus. I know this isn't the best method necessarily, but they need to find different words that mean the same thing, or they need help with citations. I know there are some individuals that still believe that the citations aren't very good, as far as what's created in the research tool. If that's the case, maybe have them create a citation, MLA citation with the research tool, then have them create it with a different tool, or have them create it by hand, compare and contrast, and then figure out what's the most accurate. If that is what you are focusing on in your writing, I think that's perfectly acceptable too. But, the research tool is there embedded within Docs. It's a great way to support those struggling writers. Google Keep. Cannot say enough about how awesome Google Keep is, and I really think, as far as struggling writers go, storyboarding or outlining their process, maybe the typical standard outline doesn't work for them, but maybe adding a bunch of Google Keep notes will be the ticket for them. Here's why. So you can, in Google Keep, it works similar to like Trello, if you know what that is, or it's like digital sticky notes, I guess, is another way to describe it. But you can create lists, you can color code your lists, you can add images to your notes, you can access across all devices. You just go to keep.google.com if you haven't used it before. You can capture your thoughts via text. You can use voice activation. You can submit your thoughts via voice. You can share your notes with others. You can add collaborators for brainstorming or sharing reflections. And you can add reminders. So you could add a reminder every single day. Hey, you need to write another sentence. Hey, you need to write another paragraph for your paper. Or reminder every week at 9 o'clock. That's the start of class. Hey, reminder, you need to do this, this, and this with your writing. Great way to keep track of where you're at, and a great way to keep important information together for not only you as a student, but also to share with your teacher. Grammarly, maybe you've heard of this, spell checker and grammar checker. Here's some great highlights of Grammarly. I don't use Grammarly as much as I probably should sometimes, especially with emails and writing quick emails, but it has a plagiarism detection. It can identify spelling mistakes, find errors in grammar usage and mechanics. It offers suggestions. I think this is a great way to support struggling writers who feel like the mechanics get in the way of their writing. So I'm a really poor speller. It really gets in my way. Grammarly can maybe help me with that. And so I can focus more on the content and what I'm trying to articulate and my thoughts rather than mechanics. And a couple last things here. Voice typing in Google Docs. You know, when they first released this, I thought it was kind of cool. It's a new speech-to-text tool. It's built right into Google Docs. But I haven't used it as much as maybe I should in terms of like brainstorming or identifying thoughts. Voice activation has really improved a lot, and voice typing is continually improving. And it is fairly accurate, I must say. So from the very little I've used it. But again, you know, voice typing, maybe students struggle as typists, if you will. And maybe activating voice typing would help them articulate their thoughts for a paragraph of information, or just get all their thoughts out there as far as what they're thinking of a certain topic, and then piece it together afterwards. I think it's a really valuable tool, and I suggest you at least trying that. And then lastly, excuse me, big thing for, you know, struggling writers is the access points. So if they have access to Drive and Docs on their tablets or their phones, maybe even having access on their phone and being able to plug in thoughts as they think of them, or, you know, doing more, not necessarily your typical outline, but maybe a thought came to them right after they got ready in the morning and they wanted to add it real quick. Well, the accessibility of Keep or Google Drive or Google Docs and now voice typing, maybe they could plug into their document real quick, use voice typing, say a paragraph of information. I really thought about this, and this as far as my argument for this paper. It's on their document, saves simultaneously. You know, that might be the access point that they need so they can feel like they are supported. They don't always have to sit down at the computer and type out their work, but they can take their work anywhere with them. That's all for supporting struggling writers. Like I said, I think there's a lot of things out there in addition to this, but I think this is a good start. Thank you very much. Have a great day.